Hello, my name is Jim Autry. I want to read you a story today. In the past several years, fundamentalist television ministers and others have been expressing a great angst about how they've, quote, kicked God out of the schools, unquote. They describe our school system as overstaffed and wasteful, our teachers as unresponsive and ineffective, our students as self-absorbed slackers. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of hearing it. But I don't want to debate that here. I simply, as one parent of one student in one school, I want to tell you a story about a track meet. Let me read it to you. 5 years ago, my son Ronald was a freshman at Roosevelt High School in Des Moines, Iowa. He has autism. When he was 3, he still could not walk well, his motor skills were deficient, and he had not learned the simple reflex of putting up his hands when he fell, so that even on the simplest walks in the neighborhood, Ronald would fall on his forehead. He had a large red knot there for months at a time. I would have helped him more, but his mother, God bless her, insisted that we encourage him to make it by himself, even if it meant falling. Even though he's still not the most coordinated young man, he joined the Roosevelt marching band, and in the spring he went out for track. Once again, I credit Sally, my wife, for being the risk taker. It hurts me so much to see him in embarrassing situations that I'd probably overprotect him, but she was more concerned with making a good effort rather than embarrassment. The track coach welcomed him to the team and told him he'd run the 400 meter and occasionally the 200 meter. I'll never forget the first track meet when he was to run the 400. It was a cool day, so the team members wore sweatsuits over their silks, those silky little costumes. Immediately I was concerned because it meant Ronald would have to take off his shoes and take off his sweatpants in order to run. This is a problem because at the time Ronald still occasionally put his shoes on the wrong feet. So I was worried about the possible embarrassment of that. He also still tied his shoes the way he did when he first learned to do it. One of the characteristics of his autism is that once he learns how to do something, he does it the same way every time. So the shoes were likely to come untied during the run. Sure enough, when it was time to get ready, Ronald took off his shoes and put them back on the wrong feet. I was watching this through the lens of a camcorder because I'd promised I'd tape his run. I was too far away to call him, but one of his teammates knelt close to him and discreetly pointed out the shoe situation. Ronald changed them. He went to the starting line. I kept thinking to myself, is it wrong to put him through this? Will he just be embarrassed? What does this prove? The gun sounded and Ronald began. He fell immediately behind, but that was okay because I knew his objective was to run the full 400 without stopping or falling. He fell farther and farther behind. His shoes came untied, but he kept going. When the other participants crossed the finish line, Ronald was only about halfway around. I kept the camcorder on him. As he came around the last turn toward the finish, I caught in the corner of my eye some of his teammates in the infield. They had started running with him and were calling to him, "Go, Ronald! Go, Ronald!" As Ronald came closer to the bleachers, other people began to take up the cry, "Go, Ronald!" As he passed in front of the crowd, the cry swept across the stands. Parents of other kids from other schools had picked up his name and were yelling, "Go, Ronald!" Ronald smiled and ran. When he crossed the finish line, the crowd was roaring as if an Olympic star had just set a new record. To my ears, it was like the sounds of the heavenly host rejoicing. By then, of course, my camcorder viewfinder was blurred with tears, but I did see members of other teams high-five Ronald after the race, pat him on the back, shout words of encouragement. I didn't see any self-involved slackers, only decent, sensitive, and supportive young men and women. I realized then that Ronald's run was not about me or my worries of embarrassment. It was about him and those other young people and those other parents, and somehow also how Ronald had given them the chance to reveal the divine within themselves. Later I asked Ronald, "What were you thinking as you ran?" He said, "You can do it, Ronald. You can do it." Indeed he did. 30 years ago, he might not have had the option of a somewhat normal high school experience. Yet he spent 4 years in the midst of a thriving, diverse, supportive public high school. He's eccentric, yes he is. He can be difficult, yes he can. And he sure won't set any speed records, but by the grace of God and an enlightened public education system, Ronald is in the race. That little essay is from my book, Looking Around for God.